on the set play the piano for him. Stan Laurel liked to sing all those old English tunes, and Babe would be sitting around reading his racing forms. He'd say, hell, I think I'll join in and do a little harmony here. So he'd sing harmony to Stan stuff. I used to do that on several occasions. They called me down to say, while they were changing the lights, they said, get Hatley down here, will you?
He was the exact opposite of what he was on film. He was not at all the overbearing, blustering person he portrayed on film. He was a very quiet man, very sensitive, and very sensitive to other people's feelings, considerate of other people, and gentle, very romantic, and extremely kind. He was always ready to help somebody else out. He'd think of himself last.
In the silent days of the late 20s, while the Stan and Ollie characters were developing, the names did not. When they talked to one another in films, the voices weren't heard, so they could say nearly anything that fit the situation. And when Laurel would call to Hardy, it was by the name he was familiar with. Watch closely now as Stan yells, Babe! And from those early days, traits and mannerisms were picked up along the way that became trademarks.
Out, please.
One trick used by almost everyone was the commonly seen take.
Thank you. Right, all right. Down, please.
Both were masters. The most skillful artist was Jimmy Finlayson, who developed a number of variations. And Edgar Kennedy's extension of the take was what he called the slow burn. But it was a different variation that became Hardy's trademark.
Goodbye, Mr. Hardy.
The camera look.
The looking straight at the camera, that happened accidentally the same way. He just, without realizing that he was looking at the camera, he just gave it that take to the camera, and like he was looking right at the audience. Well, in those days, they just didn't do things like that. But that got a laugh in the preview.
I think the great attribute that he had was his timing. That even that look that he did, that timing had to be right. If it had been held longer, it would have killed it. If he didn't hold it long enough, if he got back too fast, you know. And that was a great thing with Babe.
The camera look involved the audience directly. While Hope and Crosby would step out of character to deliver a line to the viewer, Hardy just stared into the lens, in effect, inviting the viewer into the scene to share the action. This was also used as a tool to cover a period of time for laughter in the movie theaters. In this scene from Toad in a Hole, we experience definite emotions from both sides. Then, of course, there were the catchphrases.
Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Why don't you do something to help me?
But Oliver Norval Hardy had dignity, too. He was fastidious. He had polish. And he had priorities. But most of all, he had...
I'm afraid we've made a little faux pas. I'm afraid that you have.
the tie twiddle.
He said one time that Stan had thrown the line at him, and for once, he went completely blank. He couldn't think of what to say. So in his nervousness, he picked up the tie, and he found he was starting to wipe his nose with it. He thought, oh, that's not going to look good. That won't look good. And so he twiddled his tie like this and dropped the tie.
That's the house up there, right on top of the stoop.
Just the sight of those stairs means trouble for Oliver Hardy.
That's the house up there, right on top of the stoop.
In 1927, Stan and Babe made a film right here. In it, they tried to get a great big tub-type washing machine up these stairs. The film was called Hats Off. It was made in 1927, and it's since disappeared. But in 1932, they made a remake of that film. They called it The Music Box, and that film won an Academy Award.
You know, Ollie, I was just thinking.
What about?
Nothing, I was just thinking.
Stan Laurel was a creative force behind the team. His character was dull of mind and void of logic, except his own. When, for example, the car won't start, little Stan tries every lever and button, including the horn.
Well, Stanley had a great sense of humor, and he was a very kindly man. Babe was always around when they wanted him. He didn't compose any gags or make any stories or anything. Stan Laurel did all those things. He was a mastermind that thought of all those things, and he was a real genius. Take it from me.
Lois Laurel Hawes, Stan's daughter, remembers her father as
A very special man. He was very dedicated to his work, and I think dedicated as a father. A very good father.
Was he strict?
To an extent. He let me get away with a lot, and I don't think I was spoiled, but I perhaps was. But I spent a lot of time with him, which I think is very important.
Stan wasn't different. He was always on. Whether he was in the front of the camera or behind the camera, he was always thinking up gags and kidding, practical jokes and things like that. But Babe was a little more conservative. Stan would just do almost anything to make you laugh at all times.
My father had a job, and in the school that I went to in Beverly Hills, most of the children's parents were in the film industry, so it wasn't any big thing. But as far as I was concerned, that was my dad's job. He went to work in the morning and he came home at night.
Stan wasn't as serious as Babe. He was serious about his work. But Stan